Hello, it's Monday, and this is Off the Menu. That's a bibulous, Charles Coulombe. I'm Vincent Franchini, and we have a wonderful show for you today. We've got questions, a lot of wonderful questions. Last week we had a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people said last week's pre-show was one of the best we've ever done. So it's not too late. You sign up to become a patron, you get access to all the pre-shows we've ever done, around 40 hours of exclusive content. What do you think about that, Charles?
Well, firstly, I don't know what positive feedbacking is about. I've always thought of feedbacking as, kind of, I don't know, bureaucrats on the feedback. But if you think feedbacking is good, I'm all for it. And what's all this bibulous stuff? You're saying I'm a drunk.
Wait, you're taking the show backwards, Charles. We're trying to move forward with the show.
Well, I'm old. I don't do that.
Well, why are you such an enemy of progress? You don't want to move forward.
Not particularly. Forward for me means every day closer to the grave. Thank you very much. I may be old. I may be senescent, as you I think was one adjective you used. I may be various other sobriquets for elderly, but bibulous. I'll have you know that I don't drink any more or any less than I did when I got here 2.5 years ago. And that's not all. That's not all. You are, I can see what you're doing. I can see what you're doing. You were stung by that critique on Twitter. Yep. It's got nothing to do with progress or going forward to something new. You were stung. You had your ego hurt by what that Twitterer said.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yes, you do. Because you responded to it. He said, and I quote, this is your host, Vincent Franchini, with the adjective Charles Coulombe. And your response to that was, I am and he is. But, which is true, but, I can see that you were stung and you think that this means we've gotten into some sort of a rut and that you can pull this single-handed coup de main to completely revolutionize our presentation. That's what you're doing. You're not fooling me for a second. I know what's going on here. I wasn't born yesterday. In fact, I was born 60 years ago. And that should tell you something.
What should it tell me?
It should tell you that I was born 60 years ago.
Well, variety is the spice of life, Charles.
You wouldn't say
I figured kill a few birds with one stone, change it up a little bit, practice controlling the narrative, which is an important skill nowadays.
How is throwing cliches right and left being new and exciting? You do sound like Variety now that you mention it. And Variety is about as cliche-ridden as you're going to get.
Cliches are cliches because they're popular and they work. Sort of like stereotypes, right?
Well, fine. I always think of, since you brought up Variety, I think of their sort of weird lingo. So, for instance, if you read a headline in Variety that said, Sticks, Chicks, Nicks, Flicks, what do you think that means?
Well, you're directly citing one of my all-time favorite movies, Yankee Doodle Dandy, and
Indeed,
I remember he parsed it, but I can't remember how it went.
Sticks, Chicks, Nicks, Flicks. It means women in the countryside dislike movies. Sticks, Chicks, Nicks, Flicks.
There you go. All right.
And you say variety is the spice of life. Variety was the spice of my father's life, maybe, or my grandfather's.
No, I wasn't referring to the magazine.
Well, now you're against the magazine. Why? Are they competitors or something?
No, I don't even know about this
Variety?
magazine.
Well, how about Dramalogue?
I don't know these boomer magazines, Charles.
What about the Hollywood Reporter?
Isn't that a tabloid?
No, it's a trade. Why, when I was your age, instead of torturing the people in my empire because I didn't have one, unlike yourself, I would spend my mornings at the late lamented Masters Club reading the trades, Variety, Dramalogue, the Hollywood Reporter, getting caught up with all the news on the biz, what was going on in the industry, and then I would saunter over to the bar and begin my then reputation for bibulosity.
Okay.
Back in those far-off days, the biggest question on my mind before 2 p.m. was always, where's my next drink coming from?
Wow.
But see, I learned to combine booze and nutrition.
How?
That fabulous invention, the bloody bullshot.
What is that?
It's a very soothing and vitamin-rich concoction made up of tomato juice, various spices, beef bouillon, and vodka.
Other than the beef bouillon, isn't that very similar to the Bloody Mary?
Well, yeah, that's what it's called, a bloody bullshot. If it just had the bouillon, it'd be a bullshot.
Oh, okay.
I won't tell you what they would call it with chicken broth, but I don't think anyone ever used chicken broth anyway.
There's a lot of nutritious, if you're going to go that route. There's screwdrivers, there's your Bronx cocktail.
Cocktail. Those are good breakfast drinks. Harvey Wallbanger.
What's that one?
It's more of the same. Orange juice and vodka, orange juice and gin, etc., etc.
Okay. Well,
the breakfast of champions. Better living through chemicals. Well, that was how I felt in my late 20s. Well, mid-20s. Well, early to mid-20s.
Okay. That's fine. We unconditionally accept you, Charles.
Oh, God. I feel strangely moved. My bowels. It's my intestines are, I don't know. Anyway, no. But seriously, it's those were carefree days for me. When I look back, I was doing comedy on the Strip. And I had no, at that point, I'd given up on having any kind of a military, political, religious, or literary career. I was going to be a comedian for the rest of my life, and I enjoyed it.
What comedian inspired you in that way? What comedian did you want to be like?
Well, there were several that I really, really, really liked. I liked Bing Crosby, and I know you don't think of him as a comedian, but he could be very, very funny. I liked Rodney Dangerfield. I liked Bob Hope. I liked, notice these were all situational comedians.
Yeah.
They weren't foul-mouthed.
This reminds me of a comment, because so in one of the past episodes we were talking about comedians, and you identified a commonality between Jews, African Americans, and Catholics, in that they filled that comedy void for WASPs, because WASPs don't do comedy. And we just had a comment from this guy. It's a typical papist bias. And then he mentioned, I think, 3 different comedians. He cited Robin Williams, Bob Hope, and I forgot some third guy as WASP comedians.
Yeah, well, Bob Hope was a convert, pal, so take him off the list.
Robin Williams didn't strike me as particularly Protestant.
He wasn't very funny, nor that funny to me. I mean, he was like that fellow in Taxi.
Andy Kaufman.
Yes, I never thought he was funny either.
Well, you're probably thinking of Mork and Mindy then, where it's like this sort of wacky.
Yeah,
thing.
which I mean that didn't strike me as too funny. Uh, but another one I liked very much was Jack Benny.
Hmm.
He was, and I liked the Smothers Brothers. Now they were wasps, so there you go. But by and large, they're the exceptions in terms of comedy.
Yeah.
Um, by and large, it's been Catholics, Jews, and blacks.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay.
And not just in comedy per se. I mean, in vaudeville, in theater. I mean, and there have been people like Humphrey Bogart, Jane Wyatt, who were real wasp of wasps, or Katharine Hepburn. Another one that comes to mind is a real wasp. But there weren't that many.
Wow, Bogey doesn't strike me as a wasp.
Oh, he was.
What? Which one? Which?
Episcopalian.
Wow. I guess
But
because
he
he seems like such a gritty New Yorker style type of personality
I know.
that I figured he was Catholic.
Yeah, absolutely. You would think so, but he wasn't.
Wow.
He wasn't. Really fooled your Uncle Giovanni.
Yeah, I'll say.
When he found out that Bogey was an Episcopalian, he almost lost his teeth. We could arrange for a conversion, he said. And I said I didn't think that was smart. Also, it didn't help that the Bogey was dead when I revealed the terrible truth to him.
I see. Okay, anything new, Charles, before we move on?
Oh, yes. Today, when we're in real time, today is November the 21st. And apart from being the birthday of my late lamented mother, she would have been 95 if she were alive, or 96 if she were alive today. It's also the death day of Franz Josef, the Emperor of Austria, who died on November the 21st, 1916, in the midst of World War I. And so it is also the accession day of Blessed Emperor Karl to the Austrian, Hungarian, Bohemian, etc. thrones.
Okay. Very good.
You're probably wondering about what's going on with the election.
Okay, what's going on with the election?
Good question. All sorts of evidence of fraud apparently being uncovered, but the question is, will there be enough for it to matter?
It doesn't look like it.
No. So it looks like, as of this moment, we're going to have President Harris, and going to be a bumpy ride.
The fascinating thing about gauging these liberal reactions to the voter fraud, these liberals act like our political system is immaculate when it comes to such things. Did you see how Twitter is stifling President Trump's accounts, and they say voter fraud is incredibly rare?
Yeah.
What? Like, what country do they live in?
Their minds.
That's ahistorical. Who fact checks them? Where's the independent fact checker on their fact check?
See, that's the thing. When I get something from Facebook or from Twitter, in private correspondence, telling me that something is or isn't, who the hell are you?
In messages, even?
Yeah, on Facebook. Yeah, if I post something on all my Facebook things are only to friends.
On your wall. Okay, I thought you meant like in messages.
No.
Oh yeah.
No,
I knew that.
But where do they get off doing that? Zuckerberg, moron or just evil? React for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of memes about those two, because they were grilled by Congress recently, and they look like caricatures. Like one's like this old wizard person. I mean, just totally nasty beard, and this other person looks like some robot.
Well, if it makes you feel better, it turns out that Zuckerberg was actually Bigfoot's love slave.
I don't know how to respond to that.
Well, obviously someone isn't reading the Weekly World News.
Obviously.
You probably never heard about Bat Boy.
No, I haven't.
You didn't know President Bush Sr. entertained aliens at the White House, did you? See? You call yourself a magnate of information, an influencer, and you're not attuned to some of the major stories that have been afflicting our country for a long time.
Well, I try to
stay sane.
Sometimes you have to protect yourself from the noise.
I see. So Bat Boy is just noise to you.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fine, if that's the way you feel.
All right.
It doesn't bother you that a hybrid mad bat was forced to spend his early years in a cavern in West Virginia. That doesn't bother you in the slightest.
What do I care about West Virginia?
They were traitors to Virginia during the Second Civil War.
Well, what interesting has ever happened in West Virginia? And I can say this because we hardly have any customers in West Virginia, so I don't mind assaulting this state. Larry
Tate would have agreed with you on
I'll
that.
never say a thing against Texas or Pennsylvania. I can tell you that right now.
This is what I love. Integrity that can't be bought. Just rented on very reasonable terms. No, that's fine. I'm all for it. All right. Well, the only interesting thing that ever happened in West Virginia, other than some coal mine fires that continue forever, is Bat Boy.
Wow.
And John Denver writing about it.
Oh, that's true, actually. I forgot about that.
You remember that your brother and Brian Feeney used to sing West Virginia.
It's a good song to sing. Yeah.
Yeah. They did. I forget which of them played the guitar. I don't think it was your brother.
I think Brian did.
Oh, gosh, I remember when they were in high school, they did that as a presentation. Or maybe it was it high school or was it...
You're mixing up a lot of different things.
Yeah, well, it's, when you're 60, you've got a right to be confused. It guards the truth,
It guards the truth. As we established in the pre-show, confusion is the guardian of truth.
That's right. It creates like a buffer between truth and stupidity.
Confusion is a great unassailable foe, like the Swiss. You don't be going into Switzerland. I mean, why would you do that? You've got these people who are armed to the teeth. Geography is a mess. Why would you do that?
Indeed. And basically, confusion plays Switzerland for truth.
And don't even get us started on the Swiss Navy, okay?
No, full of pirates. I mean, the worst thing can ever happen to you, you're on some cruiser, some Mediterranean cruise or an Indian Ocean cruise or something, and you see a ship with the Swiss flag flying. It's worse than the Jolly Roger, ladies and gentlemen. Abandoned ship. Just get off. Don't even... You don't want to be boarded by the Swiss Navy.
Scary sight.
I'll say. I mean, I'll tell you what. I saw a Swiss pirate ship in the LA River once. I was frightened.
All right. Let's move on to the memes of production, shall we?
Nationalize the memes of production.
For the common good. All right. First one is submitted... by a person named R. Leckler. I think he's a patron, actually, a new patron on Twitter. So SpongeBob meme. I don't know how I feel about that, but it says we're all sinners on earth. Ecclesiastes 7:20. Patrick says, "Yep." And there are no sinners in heaven. Yep. Therefore, there is a point of time in which one goes from being a sinner on earth to no longer in heaven. Makes sense to me. This process is what the Catholic Church calls purgatory. Purgatory is not biblical.
Well, okay. Would you listen to a sponge?
Well, so is that SpongeBob though? I mean, I don't know this character. I'm not a SpongeBob aficionado, actually.
I'm not either. Is it sponge or is it a starfish?
So, well, Patrick's a starfish.
Well then. All right, fine. It sounds like he's an Irish starfish from the name.
No, yeah, Patrick. So I don't know. And so I don't know this other character. If someone on comments could tell me what's going on here, but unfortunately, you're going to out yourself as a SpongeBob expert. So maybe.
Well, there are worse things. Maybe you can get paid for it. Who knows?
Okay. Let's see. Moving on. So I thought, we haven't delved into church scandal at all this year. We kind of try to stay away. But I
feel deprived, but I've managed somehow.
Yeah. So I guess I just want to dip into it a little bit in the wake of the McCarrick Report.
Oh.
Now, I haven't read this report, Charles. Do you have anything to opine on?
Well, I haven't read it either. I mean, the problem with the McCarrick Report is that I'm pretty sure I know the kind of filth that's in it, because I knew about McCarrick when nobody else did. I knew about McCarrick 20 years ago. But I don't think it means anything, because if it meant something, half the Curia cardinals would be out of jobs. And that's not happening. So what does it matter? Unless you go in for that kind of porn, which some people do, I guess, what's the point? You see, it would mean something if it would mean that the way they do things in the Curia was going to change. But they're certainly not going to under this pontificate. If anything, under this pontificate, you've had more pervs and criminals gathered in the Curia than the Borgias had. Or the Borgias plus Julius III, plus the pornocracy. So, I mean, the Curia and the college have been packed under the current pontificate. Fortunately, most of the packees are elderly. So perhaps in 10 or 20 years, when I'm their age, perhaps we'll have something different.
The only thing I heard about the McCarrick Report was that they pinned it on John Paul II.
Of course, he's dead.
Yeah, he can't defend himself.
No, and he's dead, and obviously they're not going to pin anything on the people who are still alive, because if they were, they'd be out of jobs. Look at Cardinal Wuerl, or Whirlybird, as he was known to his admirers.
Are you serious?
What? That he had admirers, that it was known to them?
The nickname.
Oh, sure, why not? Could be true. Oh, like the Holy See should be the only ones who can do disinformation. Nice. I think in this post-democratic age, we should all be able to do it, like our masters do.
Okay, fair enough.
No, I think that since we have no control over them and we can't choose them, we might as well at least be able to emulate them and give them a little bit of their own back. After all, it must be good because they do it. So if we do it in return, it's even better.
Okay.
See?
So I have a question emanating out of this. I've noticed a collegiality, or synodality, if you will, in priests in general, which is you don't criticize other priests. The popular and powerful bishops and cardinals are the ones who don't criticize others. Look at Archbishop Chaput, for one. He retired, I think, in last January, or he put in his resignation, but, you know.
Oh, he retired. He's out. He's gone.
Yeah. So the ones who don't criticize others, or the ones who do criticize others, don't get promoted. You're stuck. This lends me to think about sort of the corruption in police force back in the 60s and 70s. You know, police have the Internal Affairs Department. Does the church have an equivalent?
Yes, it does. But the problem is that, I mean, it's if your Internal Affairs Department are dominated by corrupt cops,
Yeah.
you know, you've got the machinery, but the machinery is only as good as the people who staff it. And I'm afraid that the situation is very dire in the Holy See. Frankly, it's as corrupt as any other time in history that's been corrupt. And I think of the pornocracy. I think of Julius III. And unfortunately, those things, periods of that sort, generally are only ended by unpleasantness, generally from the outside. I mean, the sack of Rome in 1527, Otto I coming down to Rome and settling the pornocrats' hash, things like that. I guess that the attention of the outside world is the only thing that will make these people listen.
Can the clergy wash itself? How do we clean up this mess in the church with the hierarchy? I mean, do we just wait for a hero to be in a position in the hierarchy to do it? To me,
we don't do anything except direct our funds. I mean, you don't contribute to your diocese if your bishop's a crook.
Okay.
You direct your money toward those elements of the church that are, relatively sane. That might be your parish. It might be the FSSP. It might be some missions in New Guinea. Who knows? It's whatever element of the church you consider worthwhile and doing its job. That's what you should send your money to. And that and prayer is really all you can do.
Okay, that's all we can do.
And sooner or later, either through the election of a pope or through some horror inflicted on the church from outside, these creatures will be dealt with.
I guess my question is, how many cardinals, how many bishops does it take to get things going in the right direction? Because right now it seems like, we've got a few sort of heroes. We've got Vigano, Sarah, Schneider, used to be Chaput, maybe a few others, but, they're pariahs.
Yeah, they're pariahs, but what will happen? Well, you've got several things going on at once. Firstly, as you notice, most of the current Holy Father's appointees are elderly. And that is a good thing, not a bad thing, because it means he's scraping the bottom of his appointment pool. Not all, but most of the younger clergy are saner. And the fact is that in another 10 years, another 20 years, or another 5 years maybe, there just aren't going to be that many liberal Catholics around ready to shell out for these people.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to have a much smaller church, there's no doubt about that, and a lot of beloved things are going to be lost, which many a prelate in hell will be paying for. Snap, crackle, pop, my lords.
All right.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing, though. I don't want to interfere with any prelate's personal life choices. If a prelate decides he wants to burn forever as part of the devil's company, that's a deeply personal choice that every prelate has to make for himself.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. And we've gotten sort of a criticism I've told you before, where it's like, whoa, watching the show, it seems like the church is perfectly healthy. No, there are plenty of other people who are delving into this. We have a niche, and we're going to do it. But more so than that, I follow the tenets laid down in Father Ripperger's 10 Problems in the Traditionalist Movement. In an article we posted, we took it from a video, from a sermon that Father Ripperger did, and I try to abide by it. And I'm going to read it off because it's one of the most important things you can read. So he says, giving into the vice of curiosity by reading literature which affects our faith or affect us psychologically or spiritually is another problem you see among trads. And this is something that's clearly demonic because of the fact that it drives people to spend large amounts of time reading every last stitch of literature on how bad everything is. We have an obligation to protect our faith, and sometimes that even means avoiding people who tell us the truth for which we are unprepared psychologically, spiritually, or intellectually. If reading this stuff drags you down, you've got to get away from it and stop reading it. We ought to be aware of the problems in the church, but you don't need to read too much for that. It seems like there's a new book every week almost, or there's some new article on how bad everything is. People say, Father, have you read this? Father, have you read that? I'm just like, I've seen it all. I don't need to read it to know it. And there it is, right? I mean, that's why we didn't need to read the McCarrick Report, because we already know, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I grew up in the immediate wake of Vatican II. My IHM nuns exploded in Sapphic rage when I was in second grade. I've lived the horrible nightmare. What makes me laugh is that particular criticism. Oh, you guys act as though everything's okay in the church. Well, I'm going to tell you a little secret. In one sense, it is, because you can still save your soul at the church. The means of salvation are still with us, even despite lockdowns and Governor Newsom and bishops forbidding the sacraments. You can still save your soul, despite all the lily-livered prelates and worthless politicians and all the other pieces of garbage that own us in this wonderful post-democratic age. Despite that, we can still go to heaven, and they can fry all they want afterwards.
And that leads me to, I'm going to read another part, because people ask, how do you guys stay upbeat? How do you overcome all these mental hurdles, and stay positive?
Where there's life, there's hope.
So Father Ripperger's number 5, depression and despair, which are problems with trads. He says, we cannot allow the problems of the church to affect our spiritual lives. It doesn't matter if someone's put the knife in your back. It doesn't matter how bad things are. If it's starting to affect your spiritual life, you have to get your mind off it. And this means that we have to have a detachment even from the idea of a healthy church, even though that is what we must strive for. We must be detached from any vindication from those who harmed us. That's interesting. That's fascinating. Detached even from the idea of a healthy church, which we might not even see in our lifetime.
No, I certainly haven't.
Yeah.
And I'm 60 years old.
Yeah.
But I will say that I don't want to give the impression that I'm a holy Joe, but right now there are a bunch of us here in Vienna and elsewhere connected, we're all renewing the consecration to Mary, according to Saint Louis Marie de Montfort, and it'll culminate on December 8th, on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Now, this is something, I mean, there are a lot of us involved with doing this. And, there are a number of them in Austria, there are some in the States. It's a group. The whole bunch of us are doing it once with a priest who's acting as advisor. And, I did it when I was in my 20s. I'm renewing it now. And this is precisely the sort of thing I'm talking about. You can lead a devotional life, which you'll find immensely fulfilling, but you actually have to do it. Let me share something. This here is the booklet, the Novena booklet of the Confraternity of the Precious Blood, headquartered in Brooklyn. It's a devotional society, and a lot of great prayers in that book, which I recommend highly. I joined it. This is the prayer book of the Gebetsliga, the League of Prayer for Kaiser Karl. I'm also a member, and they have their own prayer book, which is not to hand, of it's in the other room, of the Honor Guard of the Sacred Heart, to which I belong. And this here, a miniature book of hours for private devotion, issued by the now defunct Henry VI Society, who worked to pray for that particular servant of God, King Henry VI of England, for his canonization, beatification. Now, why do I bring all this up? It's not just to show how holy I am, but to emphasize the fact that we are in charge of our own devotional lives. See this here? This is a rosary.
Move it over a little bit. There we go. Yeah.
It's called a rosary. And you can say this any time of the day you want to. And there's no priest and no scumbag governor who can stop you. If you'll pardon, this is not some sort of weird entertainment, but this is a fivefold scapular. Prayers attached to each one of the scapulars, and it's got a St. Benedict medal and a Kaiser Karl medal. Now, why am I doing all this? How do you keep positive? How do you keep a good outlook? Two ways: prayer and a sense of humor. That's how you do it.
I've discovered about myself that I actually don't trust people who have no sense of humor. I was wondering why I wouldn't warm to certain people, even though they're perfectly, outstanding people even. But I don't know, if you don't have a sense of humor, it just doesn't work out.
Saint Teresa of Avila said, "O Lord, save me from sour saints." And she knew what she was talking about. So you got to cultivate the old sense of humor, because remember something: evil is absurd. It's really ridiculous. What is the one thing the devil cannot abide?
Being laughed at.
Precisely. Take anything else. Well, other than a full-blown exorcism, which he doesn't appreciate either. But the devil does not enjoy being laughed at. He enjoys being taken seriously because he's so important. Oh, yes, he's a big deal. And you'll notice that the devil's minions on earth, whether in church or state, are the same way. They're all so important in their little offices and their jobs, and they could play with their little subjects all they want. Yeah, they sure can.
Yeah, I've noticed that about responding to people on Twitter, opponents and stuff. The worst thing you can do to them is not take them seriously. and just laugh at them because they don't know how to respond then. It's like, no, you have to take me seriously. No, actually, I don't.
No, I don't. I mean, I would if you were worth taking seriously.
Yeah.
But a silly little person like you.
Yeah.
I mean, it is true. The one thing worse than being insulting is not taking them seriously. And just don't freak out, ladies and gentlemen. Stay sane inside insanity.
I forgot if I did a sales pitch for the Confraternity of the Rosary. I had reread The Secret of the Rosary, which does this huge pitch, and I joined the Confraternity of the Rosary. I guess regardless of whether I did it or not, I need to plug that coming up. But anyhow, what really intrigued me was you mentioning the Confraternity of the Precious Blood.
Yeah.
Let's go into that. What is that about? Or what are the daily what are the, not obligations, but to enroll in a confraternity, generally there's some requirement of prayers, right?
There sure is.
And if there are any promises attached to?
Well, yeah. There are prayers you say. We've got prayer, morning prayer, evening prayer. You offer your masses for other members of the fraternity and so on, but mostly it's a personal thing. That the masses, in this case, in the convent of the Monastery of the Precious Blood in Brooklyn, which I finally got the chance to visit last January. I've heard about it all my life. It is so beautiful. It's all the artwork and all that is all about the precious blood. It's really lovely. The confraternity, of course, goes back a long time to Europe, but the Sisters Adorers of the Precious Blood, who are the order that are the sponsor of the confraternity here, they're originally a French-Canadian order. Founded by Mother Catherine Aurélie in Quebec in the 1880s. I didn't know until I was writing my book on the Holy Grail what a wonder worker she was. I'd read her life in this book years ago, but it doesn't give a hint of the many miracles that there were around her. So it's I joined both the Confraternity of the Precious Blood and the Honor Guard of the Sacred Heart while I was writing the Grail book. Because, as you can imagine, the Grail, Precious Blood, Sacred Heart, very tied together.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they enmesh with the Eucharist and with the Kingship of Christ, which in turn, all those devotions bring us back to the Queenship of Mary and the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And all these devotions kind of work back and flow in and out of each other.
What exactly is asked for the precious blood? So you're asked to do daily prayers, morning and night?
Morning and night. You wear the medal, which is also on my scapular. It's just on the other side. And you've got you wear the novena medal, which looks like that, only it's metal.
Too many medals.
It's got the miraculous medal and the St. Joseph medal with the crucifix.
I can't be wearing that many medals. I've got the miraculous medal and a St. Jude medal. I can't be putting like 4 medals on my chain.
I can. I've got 5 scapulars. I could easily take 4 medals.
But that's cloth.
Yeah.
I don't want to jingle jangle everywhere with my medals. I don't know.
You don't want to jingle jangle with your medals?
Okay. Let's move forward to the questions, shall we?
Okay. Yeah.
Question from Y. Have you heard of the protest in Thailand? What are your thoughts about what's going on?
Well, apparently they get a bit of financing and organization from outside the country, NGOs, etc. They want basically they want the country to be as stupidly run as everywhere else. Now,
What,
mind you,
liberal? Wait, okay.
yeah. Now, mind you, there's a lot that's wrong with the Thai system, but what's wrong with it is not political. What's wrong with it is cultural and so religious.
Well,
It is a Buddhist country.
how could something be wrong culturally but not politically?
Well, let's put it this way. Whatever is wrong politically is rooted in the culture. So if you would want to change, if you want to improve the politics of a country, you have to improve its culture. And if you want to improve its culture, you have to improve its religion. To give you a concrete example of what I mean, they're upset. For instance, the protesters were upset because there's no LGBT marriage in Thailand. So they're basically calling for 10 limitations on the monarchy and gay marriage. Well, no. Now, the problems with the monarchy are not problems. Let's put it this way. To do what they want would simply make the situation worse. It would lend Thailand to be completely controlled by the politicians instead of only partly. Now, part of the difficulty, of course, is that the new king is not the man his father was. His father was an incredible individual.
What are their names?
I can't pronounce them.
Oh, wow. That's a rare occurrence.
Yeah, I know. I'm not good with Thai names.
Okay, that's okay. I'm not good with names from many ethnicities, so. All right. I feel a special bond between us now.
All right, good.
All right, so okay, well, what did his father do that was so good? Walk us through a little bit of Thailand, because we don't. At least I don't know much.
Well,
of their history.
basically, Thailand had until 1932. Thailand was an absolute monarchy. In 1932, the then king, the old king died. The new king, who was the older brother of the king who died recently, he was basically, his power was taken away by a military coup. And then he died kind of mysteriously in 1948 or something. I forgot the year. And the current king's father became king. Now, he was looked at as almost a god by the Thai people. And the position of the king in Thailand is that he's also the head of the Buddhist community. So he's got a lot of divine overflow, you might say.
Is it so? There's room for that in the Buddhist theology?
Oh yeah. In Buddhist kingdoms, the king is the head of the national Sangha. But by the same token, the Thai kings doubled that with being the special protectors of the religious minorities. So the Catholics in Thailand, for instance, were very, very loyal to the king because he was their protector against the majority. Still is. Yeah. And the same is true of the few Muslims and Hindus and people like that. But overwhelmingly, the Thais are Buddhist. So, under the old king, you had this interesting setup where usually either the politicians or if the military got annoyed with them, the military would then overthrow them. They'd have a military government for a while, then they'd revert to civilian government. They could do anything they wanted, and the king would sit by and watch up to a point. But beyond that point, the king would say, no, you're not doing that. And then the leadership would step down. And they'd either have an election or they'd do something. So that was the way it was for decades and decades. Now, the old king died. The new king, his son, had a reputation as crown prince for being kind of a playboy. And he simply didn't have the gravitas that his father had. Perhaps he's too Western. But he certainly has resisted, up till now, the changes that are being demanded by these students. Now, the students are very Westernized. They've been to universities, and this is what I mean by a cultural problem. You live in a country like Thailand, which is dominated by a given tradition, but your universities are all filled with professors who have Western Marxist ideas that are stupid in the West and really crazy outside of a Western setting. I mean, it just, I think it breeds resentment. You have a caste system, say, in a given country. You have a class system, a class structure that's functioned the way it has for a long time. Your professor is filled with Western egalitarian ideas, and he says, well, we should destroy it, and everybody should be equal. Well, yeah, except you know what? That's never happened anywhere.
How do you know it's Western influence and not Chinese influence?
That's a good question, and the two are the same. Chinese communism is a Western construct.
Yeah.
It's alien. You see, the thing, this is what makes me laugh when I hear about all these anti-colonial and anti-Western morons. It's all Western. Indian nationalism is Western. There was no India before the British constructed it. And there's a reason why the co-foundress of the Congress Party was an English lady named Annie Besant. It's like our own country, in the United States. The ideas of the founding fathers were European ideas. And those ideas, or their Marxist equivalents, or liberalism, whatever you want to call it, the whole shebang, it's all a Western frame of reference. And it is now busy destroying, as it did in Nepal, the last holdouts of non-Western polity, of which Thailand is one. Will the Thais be able to resist it? I don't know. They better, if they don't want to go through hell like they're going through in Nepal.
Is there really such a finite pool of political philosophy?
Yes.
I mean, it just...
Yeah. Well, you got to bear in mind the technology that everyone enjoys, that is the means whereby ideas get spread, is in and of itself Western. China did not colonize the world. Not even Saudi Arabia did that. Europe did that. And they built these colleges overseas, starting in the 19th century. They trained locals in Western technique. They didn't teach them much Christianity very often, but they taught them Western technology, and they taught them Western economics and Western political theory.
Okay, kind of mapping out.
Even ISIS turned Islam from a religion into a sort of weird Western ideology.
I guess what I'm interested in talking about is progress, real progress, not fake progress, real progress of political thought, political philosophy. Is the only progress possible a reversion to monarchy, in your opinion? Or is there new unexplored space that we haven't touched yet?
There's an old line in Scripture, nothing is new under the sun. Human nature doesn't change. And in the immortal words of C.S. Lewis, when he was asked about that very question, he said that where people are forbidden to revere kings, they will revere film stars, gangsters, even famous prostitutes instead. Because human spiritual nature is like physical nature. Deprive it of food and it will gobble poison. Monarchy, tribalism, if you like, the hereditary principle, are in our DNA. We have spent a couple of centuries fighting against that DNA. And the result has been some of the most miserable regimes the world has ever seen. You know, I don't want to draw too fine a point on it, but we have been in a headlong flight from reality for the past couple of centuries. We've been trying to avoid human nature. We've been trying to avoid who and what people really are. We say we're all free and democratic. No. Every human society that's ever existed has been ruled by a minority. And it took COVID to rip the mask off.
That's such a good line.
It's
With
true.
the pun involved there.
Well, there's that. But, you know, in putting out our masks, we've taken them off.
Yeah.
The truth is, the vast majority of us have to obey our orders. Our masters tell us what to do, and we bark like dogs. Now, this is true of every society. So what makes one society different from another, I've said this 1,000 times, I'll say it again. It's the nature of the ruling classes, who they are, what they believe, and the state church, the established religion, which they follow. And, you know, you've got all this talk of the Great Reset. This is why more and more I'm talking about the post-democratic age. What's refreshing is that we're being told what to do by people who no longer make any pretense. And, you know, my colleague in the press, John Schmierak, made the comment that his nightmare scenario was if widespread voter fraud were proved, but there was no constitutional recourse. I don't think that would be a nightmare scenario at all. I think it would be good to have everyone's face rubbed in the truth. We are dominated by an oligarchy, which we have refused to accept or admit for a long time. Only when you accept it and identify them for who and what they are, and they're clearly identifiable, only then can you make any sort of progress, presuming that you in turn, well, become pure of heart. That's the thing, you see. The subjects really do get the masters they deserve. Our masters reflect us, and we reflect them. It's a symbiosis. And if you look, I mean, just at my time, contraception, abortion, no-fault divorce, changes to marriage. A lot of people didn't like it, but we went along with it. And the pretense was that it was all democratic, but of course it wasn't. It was ordered by the judiciary, for the most part, occasionally by other branches of government. But we more or less went along with it. And now the mask is off, and what do we find? We're wholly owned subsidiaries.
Oh.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing, of course, because I don't judge.
Okay. Question from Thomas.
Yes, sir.
What do you know of the Beast of Gévaudan?
Gévaudan.
Was this creature a wolf, a lion, or something of more supernatural origins, like some legends say? Also, is it true the beast was vanquished by silver bullets that were somehow blessed?
Oh, lordy, lordy. Well, I've heard all those things, but I really have no way of knowing what the truth of it was. I wasn't there, contrary to what you've heard. I'm really not that old. Getting there, but I'm not arrived. No, I mean the Beast of Gévaudan. That was a tremendous tale. People came from all over France to try to vanquish the thing, and supposedly it was fine. I mean, a lot of people thought it was a werewolf. And supposedly it was the silver bullets, the blessed silver bullets, that killed it. I don't know if that's true, but you know, in the face of that hideous strength we were just discussing, the Beast of Gévaudan seems a lot better.
A lot better than what?
Than what we're ruled by.
But the beast isn't a ruler, per se. Or wait,
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. When you're afraid of something, it rules you. You can't go out at night because you're afraid the Beast of the Gévaudan will get you. You've got to be very careful. You can't go out at night. And of course, you know the wonderful rhyme from the Wolfman. Remember, it was, the Wolfman. Even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blows and the moon is full and bright. So you see, the wolf of the Gévaudan, the beast of the Gévaudan, he did rule the Gévaudan, in a sense. But for all that, I think he was probably more benevolent because he was only out at night.
Okay.
We get 24-hour supervision.
Okay, just hearkening back to what you said before, the post-democratic age, I have to plug The End of Democracy by Christophe Beaufort de Chazal, one of our finest books, published by Tumblr House, proudly. This book may well be one of the most important you have ever read. Charles A. Coulombe. Charles A. Coulombe, author of Puritan's Empire.
Yeah, I think he knew what he was talking about. I agree with him.
Yeah, and so with this book, it's you don't have to be a monarchist or an extremist or whatever, some eccentric, to read and enjoy and to find what Christophe says in this book to be true. My mom read it. She's a very moderate person, and she absolutely loved it. Why are you wearing a mask, Charles?
Well, because, you're talking about moderates and extremists and all that.
Oh, yeah.
So, only an extremist would have thought we'd all be wearing masks a year ago.
That's very true.
And we wouldn't be allowed to have Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. So, and this book is so potent. It's filled with so many red pills. I went through the book with a highlighter, and to find quotes for the internet, and I practically went through the whole book. I actually put all these really good quotes. They're all on the Tumblr House page for The End of Democracy. It's just I've got like 50 quotes here. Let's see. Let me read some of them. Let's see. Public sentiment has been conditioned so much against any other form of government, and it has become so convinced that democracy, in spite of its weaknesses, is the system of humanity par excellence, that it cannot admit that this sure system could also be, like so many others, called into question.
Well, yeah. And, of course, this has never been truer than now. Could you call the system under which we live now, just to refresh your memory, the system under which we live now, could you call it democracy in the sense that you were taught democracy in school?
Increasingly less so.
Increasingly less so. How many guests are you going to have at Thanksgiving?
None.
Well, how come?
Because they're micromanaging the inside of our homes now.
I see. But we still have democracy.
Well, it's because of they're trying to achieve what's best for the common good.
Yeah, I know. It's called the Gestapo.
Anyhow, let me read a little bit more of this, because this is so potent. I just want to keep reading and reading this.
Let it fly.
Let it fly. Democracy tends toward totalitarian government through legal pretensions designed as substitutions for morality. A government which does not recognize any moral law, and for which good and evil do not exist, but only the will of numbers, opens before itself a field free to manipulation and oppression. In democracy, good and evil must become one with the law, for it is inadmissible that there should exist something superior to the law. Wow. It is striking to see how quickly a democratic population accepts as normal acts which it considered immoral, simply because they have become legal. Thus, wearing a safety belt inside a car has become a moral act because it is a legal obligation. Not insuring oneself when insurance is obligatory borders on immorality. Abortion and euthanasia, which revolted our grandparents, have become morally acceptable since being decriminalized. The salaries paid to political personnel, which constitutes an odious scandal in states claiming to be egalitarian, are generally accepted and at times even justified because they are legal. And so that's food for thought. And just my personal favorite from Christoph is his point that democracy, regardless of where it is, right? We're not just talking about the United States. He actually focuses more on Europe and talks about some of the things going on in Europe. Because he's over in Belgium, actually.
Yeah, he's in Belgium.
Yeah. So, but my favorite point of his is that democracy always shifts to the left, constantly. That's the inevitable end. Because people will inherently choose security over liberty. Liberty, he says, is too abstract. We're just not going to choose it. And I feel like history shows that we always choose security over liberty.
Yeah, well, and also there's the added fact: when people find out they can vote themselves other people's money, they get very excited about that.
That's well said too. Yeah.
They get really, oh wow, you mean I could have everybody else's dough without working for it? That's great. I'm in on that.
Why wouldn't we vote for that, right?
Why not?
So, it's a fantastic book. I need to reread it. This is one of those books that is worth reading over and over again because you just can't absorb all the goodness in it, really.
It's a very dense book. It has a lot of stuff in it, and it's really worth reading, as you say, repeatedly.
And it's very readable, too. That's one of the other things. It's so clear. Each paragraph is its own gem. So
he's a very fine writer, is Christoph, and that comes across in the English.
And so it's been out for several years. Many people have bought it and loved it. And for all the people who are asking, where's the sequel? Because Christoph doesn't offer a solution to the problems. He's in this book, it's just covering the problems. Apparently, he's still writing the book on the sequel to this. So for everyone who's interested, there's no timeline as of yet to publish the sequel. He's still writing.
He's still plugging away. Believe it or not, in a certain sense, I wrote my Star Spangled Crown as a response to it.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yep.
Just thought I'd mention it.
Popular little bundle there, because you order, I think, End of Democracy and Star Spangled Crown, just a little bit over $25, I believe, which gets
wait
you.
A minute. Wait a minute. If it's over $25,
it's free shipping and handling
while supplies last.
Right. Operators are standing by. Sorry, no
Act
CODs.
Now.
Act now. Void were prohibited, though.
Sorry, no CODs.
Yeah, sorry.
Not an actor.
Oh.
And that's not all. It's a dessert topping and a battery acid.
Oh, no.
All right, we've got when ad copy goes bad.
Wow. It reminds me of Old Silent Live, I think early 90s. One of my favorites. They used to do spoof ads that were
Yeah,
so
yeah.
funny. It reminds me of Hamburger Helper AB, which is, because they always had some, the real life Hamburger Helper was always different flavors. Hamburger Helper AB, Hamburger Helper antibacterial. It's a toothpaste and a meal.
It's a toothpaste and a meal.
Oh, man.
Well, see, that was a standard thing in advertising copy in those days. I mean, it's like, Madge, the manicurist. You'd have this woman with her hand in a vial of green goo,
Uh-huh.
and Madge is to her hand. She'd say, "Oh yes, I use palm olive. Dishwashing liquid? Oh, you're soaking in it." And the woman would go, ah.
Mm.
And you never saw Madge?
I've never seen that. It must be before my time.
Very likely. But Madge, the manicurist, was right up there with Josephine, the lady plumber, as one of the
Wow.
one of the ad goddesses of my childhood.
Huh.
And Mrs. Olson, the coffee lady.
What's her gag?
Well, Mrs. Olson was always saving. She was the Folgers pitch lady, and she was always saving young housewives' marriages because their husbands were obviously ready to dump them because their coffee was so bad. Honey, this coffee really isn't very good. And you'd see the wife squirt. And then the next scene, she's over at Mrs. Olson's next door saying, and he doesn't like my coffee. And, she was obviously afraid her marriage was going down the tubes. So Mrs. Olson, who had a Danish accent, would say, "You should try Folgers coffee in the morning. It's mountain grown. That's the richest kind." Well, it's not only the richest kind, it's the only kind. Because coffee grows in the mountains, that's just where it is. It would be her like saying, Chateau Lafite, it's made from grapes. Yeah, it sure is. So, at any rate, God knows how many young marriages Mrs. Olson saved just through pushing Folgers coffee.
The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup.
That's right. That came later, but yeah, it's very true. I actually don't find that to be true. I find waking up to be a real chore, to be honest with you. I don't care for it. So I always set my alarm 15 minutes before I want to get up. So when I wake up and I don't feel like getting up, I'll set it for 15 minutes later and then go back to sleep for another 15. Then I'll get up.
That makes sense.
Well, you've got to learn to trick yourself if you want to function at all.
Yeah.
Especially if you're bibulous.
Especially. Right, next question is from Patty.
Okay.
Charles, how should we interpret historical condemnations of works of art by the church's hierarchy? I fully acknowledge the role of bishops in safeguarding the minds of their people, but are we really meant to consider past bans on things like Molière's Tartuffe, Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, and swing tango dancing as having any weight today?
Well, I don't know about them having weight in the sense of abiding by them strictly, but they're always worth examining because it would certainly refer to, shall we say, a dangerous tendency, if nothing else. Also, you've got to bear in mind that those condemnations were for people whose sensibilities were more refined than ours. You're talking about a time when a well-turned ankle could set a fellow's attention toward a fire. Now, she basically has to be naked for him to notice. So you've got to allow for the degeneracy of our tastes.
Yeah. What's the story with Les Miserables?
I don't remember the condemnation. I mean, Hugo hated the church, so I'm sure that the churchmen in it were made to look bad, which could have been it. Or there could have been something else. I don't know. I've never read the condemnation, so I can't tell you. But Hugo was an anti-clerical apart from his very early career. So he wasn't really what you would call a favored number one son.
All right. Question from Brian. Charles, will those who are living in the last days and who end up going to purgatory likely have to spend much longer there, seeing as they won't have the prayers of the church militant to relieve them, and most especially the holy sacrifice of the Mass?
I have no idea. I don't know. I'm not going to be there. Well, I mean, I will be there, but I haven't been there since yet to know. I really couldn't tell you that kind of thing. Eschatology is really beyond me.
Well,
you know how I hate to speculate.
I think we can map it out a little bit. So, I always held the opinion that, like, for today, for us, I don't know if this is the last days, but for us, we undergo far more temptation. Everything is just in front of us all the time. Opportunity and occasions of sin. It's just, ugh. But that is counterbalanced by extra grace from God. And I attributed some of the extra grace to all the people in the church triumphant. Right?
Well, that may be. I mean, Lord knows there are enough of them from all the many ages of the church. You know that I post every morning the saints of the day.
Right, yeah.
And I'll tell you my little secret, by the way. I only post the ones that have pictures.
Okay.
Because people don't look at the other ones.
Yeah.
So I don't bother if they don't have a picture. Now you know. But what always gets me is how they come from all over the world and all over time.
Yeah.
So on a single day, you might have a Chinese martyr, a Celtic princess nun, an Italian religious order founder. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I see what you mean about the large number of the triumphant, because it's been filling up since our Lord's ascension.
Yeah. I mean, the church militant aren't the only people who pray for those in purgatory, right? It's also the church triumphant.
Yeah, that's true. They
So,
do indeed.
So I wouldn't worry, Brian. I don't think you're gonna get a raw deal in that sense. Or
you're not going to be cheesed out if that's what you're worried about.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Superfan Ross.
Okay.
As has been articulated frequently and brilliantly on this show, Jacobites fought their campaigns in the name of and for the glory of their rightful Stuart monarchs. However, given most of the Jacobites themselves were members of the Scottish Episcopal Church, and clan chiefs still are, and that church also paid a very dear price indeed for their involvement and association with the failed Jacobite campaigns, damage that church still has never recovered from, is it fair to say that while the Jacobites fought for a Catholic royal monarchy and dynasty, it is the Scottish Episcopal Church that is in fact the church of the Jacobites themselves?
Well, certainly not the Scottish Episcopal Church as it's become. It's true that they were non-jurors, and they were certainly very Jacobite in the 18th century. But that's a long time ago. And I don't know, as far as numbers go, how much of a majority they were. There's a famous story, and I forget which town it was in, but before the Jacobite Wars, during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, the great Montrose, the Marquis of Montrose, who was Charles I's great lieutenant in Scotland, he took a cathedral city. Now, the bulk of his army were Catholic. The bulk of his officers were Anglican. And he was one of the very few Presbyterians on the king's side. So the story goes that they took a cathedral town. Of course, the cathedral had been through all three religions at different times. So the bulk of the army heard Mass in the body of the cathedral, in the nave. At a side chapel, an Anglican minister offered the Book of Common Prayer service for the officers. And then poor Montrose was in some room by himself while a Presbyterian minister read the Bible at him. So, I mean, that was kind of sad. But in truth, in this, as in everything else, I think that the future of the best of Anglicanism, of their patrimony, as Pope Benedict XVI put it, is to be found ultimately in the ordinarians. That's where this kind of stuff will best be preserved. Because I can assure you that the Jacobites would not have known what to have made of either priestesses or gay marriage. Let alone priests who doubt the existence of God. And all of these things, the Scottish Episcopal Church has let itself in for. I mean, traditions are wonderful, and nobody loves them more than I do. That's why when I go to Edinburgh, I always go to Old St. Paul's, which is it's the Anglican, the Episcopal congregation in Edinburgh. I go to St. Giles Cathedral first, which is Presbyterian now. It was Catholic, it became Anglican, then Presbyterian. And when it became Presbyterian, its congregation were expelled and started Old St. Paul's. So I go to St. Giles as the Coronation Church of Scottish Kings. And then I go to Old St. Paul's. And, I have a great affection for it. But they have priestesses there. I mean, again, one has to realize there's a difference between what was and what is and what will be. And so one of the reasons why I'm very proud to be a member of the Ordinariate, even though I'm a cradle Catholic, is because I do value certain elements of the Anglican tradition very much, and the Jacobite side is certainly one of them. Although my Scottish ancestors were Catholic Jacobites from the islands. McKinnon of Skye, not that I'm boasting. The people who brought Drambuie. I said I'm not boasting.
Okay.
Did I mention that they were McKinnons? And also McDonald's of the Isles. Did I mention that? No, I didn't? Okay, well, they were McKinnons and McDonald's. Not that I'm boasting about it, of course. And did I mention they came over to Canada on the brig Alexander in 1772, which is like the Mayflower for Scottish Canadian Catholics? And did I mention that there are more Catholics of Scots descent in Canada than in Scotland, and more native speakers of Scots Gaelic in Canada than in Scotland? Did I mention that? Now, Ross, I don't want to seem parochial or self-aggrandizing, but at any rate, I failed. But no, seriously. But having said all that, I mean, I certainly respect the memory of the non-jurors and all that. And, particularly people like Montrose and Bonnie Dundee and all them, and Sir Walter Scott, who was an Episcopalian, not a Presbyterian. The Catholics were pretty much shunted aside and locked up in places like the Enzie and the Hebrides. But, and certainly given a choice of company between a wee free and an Episcopalian in Scotland, I take the Episcopalian any day. There's no doubt about that. The wee frees are a bit much. My apologies for my terrible attempt at a burr. It's one of those accents I can never do well. I've tried my whole life. I have yet to succeed. My dad could do a wonderful burr, but I can't. So there you go. Oh, and by the way, never, if it's Scots, never call it a brogue.
Really? Why?
Yes. The Irish have brogues. The Scots have burrs.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Ah, well, you don't want to be confused with the two, don't you know? The Irishman, he doesn't have a burr at all. He's got a brogue, doesn't he, just?
Okay. A question from Theo.
Aha. Speaking of Jacobites.
Could you explain Martinism? More broadly, could you elaborate on the influence of esoteric traditionalism on right-wing thought and on the traditional Catholic movement? Has there been infiltration? Is it concerning when trads approvingly quote Julius Evola and René Guénon, for example?
Well, you just opened up a huge can of worms because you've got several different things going on at once. Martinism and Claude de Saint-Martin, the philosophe inconnu, is one thing. He certainly considered himself a Catholic. And he came up with some pithy remarks like the church is the priest, but the priests think that they're the church. Which, go reread the McCarrick Report. Anyway, I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. But that was one sort of esotericism. It's very complex and very difficult to follow. Guénon and Evola are different things entirely. Where Saint-Martin believed the Catholic Church to be the one true church, Evola was a self-described pagan and rejected the church, as did Guénon, who became a Muslim. So there's a world of difference between Saint-Martin and Evola and Guénon. Now, having said that, there are a lot of people who call themselves Martinists who are into some pretty peculiar things. But de Maistre was very much affected by Saint-Martin, as was von Baader, and you would be very hard put to call them non-Catholics.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, again, one of the problems you've got when Catholics identify these things is that they don't make distinctions. So, for instance, they'll like the Kabbalah. People will come up with, and they get, oh, it's Kabbalistic. Okay, well, what exactly does that mean, number one? Well, it's Jewish, so it's bad. Well, it's a little more complex than that. When you look at someone like Blessed Raymond Lull, who was a Kabbalist, obviously what he meant by it and what he did with it was rather different than what some of the Jewish sages did. It's certainly different from what Madonna does at the Kabbalah Center in LA. And it's very different from what a lot of self-proclaimed magicians do with it. So in all these things, you've got to bear in mind that you do have to make distinctions. To answer your question about Guénon and Evola, it's very disturbing when people quote them, to my way of thinking.
Okay. Well, what are they quoting them about generally? Like, what's their good points?
Oh, they're good points of the revolt against modernity, against democracy, against the mass man, against all that kind of stuff. And they had some interesting things to say, but there are real Catholics who say it a lot better. So, I mean, if the problem with Guénon and the quote-unquote traditionalist school of that sort is that basically they look at the fact that there was an original religion underlying, an original revelation given to Adam, if you will, underlying mankind, which was more or less corrupt, save among the Jews, who eventually gave it to us, but you can find remnants and bits and pieces of it in ancient religions. For such as them, there's this underlying tradition, and a current religion is of value to the degree that it conforms to it. And for Guénon, Islam was the key religion. The truth of the matter is that non-Catholic religions only have value to the degree that they resemble Catholicism, not the other way around.
Yeah.
You might say that Guénon and those guys have the wrong end of the telescope.
Right. Question from Anita.
Mm-hmm.
Charles has commented on the paucity of Republican heads of state that would qualify for sainthood. What about Engelbert Dolfuss of Austria?
Well, Dolfuss was a monarchist, as was Garcia Moreno of Ecuador, the other one whom she might have cited. So they really wouldn't count. They considered themselves as stand-ins for the real thing and hoped to replace themselves with the real thing when opportunity would offer. Unfortunately, since both of them were the victims of murder most foul, it didn't happen.
Well, what about their candidacy in any case?
Well, candidacy, for sainthood?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'd be all for it. But they would hardly qualify as Republican leaders in the usual sense. To me, you'd have to qualify, you'd have to be dedicated to the Republic, not want to replace it with your rightful king.
I see. Was anybody able to tease out a cultus?
For Dolfuss?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. But of course, ever since Karl Renner became a little god, that sort of died down. And now, if you have any respect for Dolfuss, you're considered a far right winger, even though it was his supporters who fought and died at the hands of the Nazis, while Renner and his scumbags were collaborating. I'm sorry. Did that sound mean? I'll have you know I went to Dolfuss's grave not long ago.
And I hope you noted that I used the wording from the bishop who sort of rejected Chesterton's cause. Yeah, he couldn't tease out. Yeah.
No, I couldn't tease out why anyone paid attention to him, the bishop, I mean. But, I guess you should just go ahead and forbid the sacraments. Well, they've got to be able to do something useful with their lives.
So, we kind of haven't talked about that because we're not over in the United Kingdom. So they really don't have access to the sacraments in any way over there?
No, but they don't. But who needs sacraments when you've got bishops?
Like, that's unbelievable. Like, if I was living in the United Kingdom, I would get the megaphone and screaming everywhere.
You already went through that. You had no sacraments in the Archdiocese of LA.
Well, and that was horrible.
I know, but you didn't go running around the way you want the English to. You submitted. Until somebody, I don't want to point out any fingers, till somebody got you a bootleg confession.
I don't know. I kind of moaned and groaned on the show as much as I could. That's sort of my megaphone.
Well, that's my point. There wasn't any great uprising. Nobody went to the Temple of Baal that is the cathedral in LA.
You can't say that, Charles.
What?
You can't call the cathedral a Temple of Baal.
It looks like a Temple of Baal.
But it's not. The Mass still happens there.
Well, it does. God knows what else goes on there.
Okay, but that's just rough. Pray for everyone in the United Kingdom, because without sacraments, that...
In a post-democratic age, we don't know when our masters will allow us access to anything. All we can do is sit tight until they give us permission.
I mean, the thing that bothers me the most about especially when it happened in, we are victimized over here, the thing that is the most outrageous about being denied the sacraments is how there's no way that a priest can't stand on one side of the screen and you're on the other, and you're both wearing masks, and you're, the way that we do it in California, even, you go in a classroom and they mark it.
It doesn't matter. It's bondage and discipline. It's submission and obedience to our masters.
I mean, you compare that to how the interactions in a grocery store. I mean, come on. Just come on.
No. See, the one is important. The other is like belonging to the Rotary Club.
I know that's how the state views it.
And that's how the church views it, too. Otherwise, it wouldn't go along with it so easily. As I say, in this pre-democratic age, our masters tell us what we can and can't do, and we bark like dogs. That's, Oh, but be sure to vote. And pay your tax, by the way. Because if you don't, they will punish you.
to what extent is the hierarchy in the same position as us, where the state says do it, and if you don't do it, you get punished severely?
Well, hierarchies have been in this position in the past. Do you know what the color red on the cardinals' robes means?
What?
They have the right to shed their blood for the church. See, here's the thing. When you become a prince of the church, it's not just a wonderful thing that you get to order people around and treat them like garbage, although that is fun. You have certain obligations as well. It's not all about being Cardinal McCarrick. It's also being a successor of the apostles. What happened to the apostles except for St. John? And even he got boiled in oil. They were all martyred. So to answer your question, it is the duty and the obligation of the hierarchy to stand up to the state, especially when the sacraments are being interfered with. It has always been that way. The fact that there is such a universal pusillanimity, that word, weakness, is amazing. And mind you, they haven't all done it, to be fair. And some of them have winked at their priests continuing to serve the people. But in Austria, for instance, the churches are not closed. The bishops voluntarily voided the Mass. What have I got to say about such people?
That's kind of worse.
Yeah, it is. Now, to be fair, they did that after they had a meeting with the chancellor. So it could be he told them and their leaderships went along with it. Hard to say. Because it could well be that he didn't want the political heat again for forbidding the Mass the way he got the first time. So this way he shoves it on to the clergy. But either way you cut it, it doesn't make the authorities in church and state look good at all. Especially when you consider what is allowed to be open, as you mentioned earlier. But you see, in a post-democratic age, the masters decide according to whatever their particular whims are. And we obey, like the good little pets we are. At least we're free of monarchy. Even in the constitutional monarchies, like Britain and the Commonwealth and Scandinavia and Spain and the Benelux countries, the politicians rule. The king merely reigns. So they have freedom there too. Justine Trudeau has more power in Canada than the real queen.
We could talk about this forever, so
Let's move on.
All right, question from Rob. Greetings and salutations to the talent and a grudging nod to the great plutocrat.
Ooh, that's you.
All right.
And it's wonderful to be acknowledged as a great talent. Mother always said I was above average.
All right. He says, I'm interested to hear your thoughts about parallels between today and the late Roman Republic. They had a two-party system, Marius versus Sulla. The Marius party was ostensibly for the people, while the Sulla party was for the elites. By the time of Pompey and Caesar, voter fraud and voter intimidation was the norm. As a follow-up, so let's first handle this.
Well, I mean, there certainly are a lot of similarities, and I presume we will get a strong man out of this. We will get a Cromwell. And I presume that he will be wrapped in the flag and lift high the cross, probably no corpus. And our future ruler will decide, just like our current rulers do, but he'll have a different set of beliefs. He'll belong to a different established faith, which, like our current masters, he will impose on us.
As a follow-up, does Charles consider Roman emperors to be monarchs? Why or why not?
Well, that's a good question. And the answer is yes. I mean, the difference between a mere strongman and a monarch, I would say the Roman emperors became increasingly monarchs as the Roman Empire went on, is that the average strongman, in his own mind, owes his power to the fact that he crawled his way to the top. The monarch considers himself king by the grace of God or the gods, or emperor. So when Augustus, whom we consider the first Roman emperor, when he started out simply as first citizen, as princeps and so on, that's what he was. But when he began to think that he was emperor by favor of the heavens, he transitioned, as they say, which, by the way, is a misuse of transition, which is not a verb. But as they say, there's no noun you can't verb.
Augustus was able to end the civil wars and establish a government that lasted another 400 years. 1400 if you count the East. There was peace for the average citizen. But that government was certainly oppressive and was abused by his successors. Should we think of Augustus as a good guy or bad guy on net?
On net, I'd say a good guy. I mean, it was abused by some of them, but not all of them by any means. And of course, after Constantine, and particularly after Theodosius, the Roman Empire became a decided vessel for good. Actually, even from the time of Augustus, it allowed the faith to travel from Palestine to Britain in a way that it couldn't have done before the empire existed.
All right. Last question for today is from Zane.
Okay.
May Charles give some advice on how to have a more joyful faith. That is to say, a faith that is motivated by the love of God rather than fear of God. I converted to Catholicism 2 years ago at the age of 17, and for the first year or so, I was incredibly on fire for the faith. It changed my life drastically, in a good way. I lost many friends and even broke up with my girlfriend who I had been having casual relations with because I knew it wasn't compatible with my new faith. For the past year or so, it seems that my faith isn't motivated by love, but the fear of hell. I'd really appreciate any advice Charles could give me.
Yeah, all right. Well, what I would suggest, firstly, the fear of hell is not a bad thing. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. But what I would suggest you look into are the devotions of the Sacred Heart and the Precious Blood. And, of course, as a connection of that you look more into Eucharistic piety. So I would recommend some of the standard authors, Father Faber on the Precious Blood. I would recommend on the Sacred Heart, St. John Eudes, the writings of St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, and there is a French website I really want to recommend to you, and I also want to recommend, if you don't read French, that you get your Google Translate geared up. It's called Spiritualité Chrétienne, which is Christian spirituality in French. But that's the name of the website. There's a section on the Sacred Heart there that's really, really worth reading. And St. Peter Julian Eymard, Eymard, on the Blessed Sacrament. That's what you really have to look at. You've got to look at Christ and at his reaching out to us, his dying for us, his love of us. Dom Columba Marmion, specifically Christ and his mysteries, liturgical year. These are all things that will help you a great deal. One of the great things about Dom Guéranger in particular, as a friend of mine said when he read him, It's not everything a Catholic should know, but everything a Catholic should feel. And I think that's a fair appraisal. And your devotional life. I mean, say the rosary, make visits to the Blessed Sacrament in particular, adoration, benediction when you can find it. And, obviously, the thing you've got to bear in mind is that hell is a terrible place, and Christ died to make sure you wouldn't go there. So what you have to do is take advantage of that. Return his love by making use of it.
Okay, that'll do it for this episode.
Well, I don't know that that's entirely true.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, if you stop and think about it, look at all the topics we haven't touched on. Chinese food comes to mind.
Nobody asked about Chinese food.
Well, no one asked about it, but I'm thinking we haven't spoken about it.
Well, we can speak about that next episode. We run out of time, Charles.
Talk about wonton soup.
Why would we want to talk about wonton soup?
Oh, wonton soup's delicious. Especially one of the big bowls. Not one of the little tiny ones. We'll through it in a minute. One of the big serves 4 as an entree, with lots of wontons and big chunks of barbecue pork and chicken, or wonton, basically. Chicken and beef and barbecue pork and pea pods and stuff like that. And big ground pork-filled wontons and the delicious, delicious broth.
This isn't the Food Network.
Well, no, it's not the Food Network. If it was the Food Network, I'd be speaking about pozole or caldo de res.
Okay.
I mean, and for that matter, I haven't even touched on hot and sour soup.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I'm kind of a mood for something like that right now.
Yeah, you probably don't get any of that in Austria.
Wonton soup, I do. And also pho, I get. The Vietnamese soup.
Yeah,
I get.
yeah.
That they have here. The Vietnamese and Chinese food you can get. Mexican food, not really.
That's weird. I like Mexican food more than Vietnamese.
No, I'm about even Steven with them. But there is a Mexican place that none of whose food is really very authentic. But they do make it good chicken mole. That's the one thing that they have that's really spot on. Reminds me of the Luna restaurant in San Gabriel, across from the Mission, now burned out, of course, which had that chicken mole Brother Leonard Mary used to like so much. And speaking of Brother Leonard Mary, on Monday, when they see this, it will be the 7th anniversary of his death. 7-year mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, please remember in your prayers the repose of the soul of Brother Leonard Mary, MICM. Great friend to all of us who knew him. The other thing is that the 23rd is the feast of St. Columban, the patron saint of my family. So, if I've done you any good, ladies and gentlemen, say a prayer to my patron. Tell him to keep it up.
All right.
Do you got anything you want to ask me?
I do.
What's that?
If it's Monday...
It must be off the menu.
What about the soul you save?
In all likelihood, all things considered, that is to say, with regard to all due understandings of these processes, it's quite possibly you're wrong.
Okay. I'll see you next time, everyone.
Take care, guys.